I should get going. Right, if you run into any trouble in the fringe, just speak my name. No one should be foolish enough to harm you. In Ronson Canyon, Scarlet was among the strongest experts. But in the fringe, an early-stage high god like her was pretty ordinary. Even a small faction in the fringe would be a high god. As those new to the fringe would be bullied or targeted, it was likely that she would face troubles in the chaotic land. I will be careful, replied Scarlet cheerfully in a beautiful smile. Han Shuo said farewell to Scarlet and left. Han Shuo had always been a person who reciprocates both kindness and malice. He took his revenge against Hoffs, Wallace, and the others, but he did not forget repaying Scarlet's kindness. Seeing that he had accomplished his objectives, Han Shuo decided to return to the fringe. On a murky, gloomy, and desolate graveyard where bones were littered all over the ground. Faint, ghostly green lights would randomly flash in the thick mist. A tomb that was buried deep under the ground suddenly erupted with bright lightning flashes. A majestic figure emerged from the tomb, and he took a deep breath. A peal of sinister laughter then sounded from an even bigger grave. It asked, "Hee hee, Salas, you have fully recovered from your injuries, right?" The bright electrical sparks on his body forced the mist to dissipate. He stomped on a massive skeletal frame, and it was wrapped with lightning bolts before immediately pulverized. Sala's sparking eyes turned to the grave and replied, "Thanks a lot. Without the assistance of your God Hunter Alliance, I wouldn't have recovered so soon." "You're welcome, you're most welcome, hee hee, but don't forget about the things you promise you'd do for us in return." The person inside that grave sounded extremely cunning. He said, "Tyre, Log, and the others have ruled the fringe for too long. It's about time someone else takes their places. We God Hunter Alliance have drooled over that wonderful place for a long time." Tyre, Log, and the others sharing a piece of the omphalos with the kid meant that they have recognized his position. "Humph, in any case, I no longer have a place in the fringe and I can't return. Whatever you do to them or that place, I no longer care," remarked Salas angrily. He seemed very discontented with the sovereign's actions. "Good, good. Salas, I heard that the nemesis of yore has left the fringe. He's been in the limelight around the darkness and death dominions. How about we join forces and stop him from returning to the fringe?" suggested the person in the grave in a smiling voice. Salas stared blankly for a moment before he sneered and said, "That kid is as elusive as a ghost, but you somehow know his whereabouts. I received intel 3 days ago that the Ronson Canyon had been purged of god hunters. That guy is currently heading back to the fringe from the Death Dominion. Hee hee, this is my territory. I have the most extensive intelligence network after the Death over God. As long as he's in the Death Dominion, it's not that hard to locate him," replied the person in the grave in a confident voice. It was obvious from Sala's expression that he was interested in the idea. After hesitating for a moment, Salas said, "I had fought that guy twice. He is extremely vicious and treacherous. It's easier to defeat old foxes like Tyre and Log than to defeat him. Not to mention, that kid is extremely good at escaping. He's extremely vengeful and his strength improves at lightning speed. If we do not have overwhelming power against him, then just forget about assaulting him." "Salas, don't tell me that you are afraid of that kid." The person in the grave laughed out loud before he said, "You have been dominating the fringe for countless years. Even we hegemons of the God Hunter Alliance are very admiring of you, so much so that we dare not invade the fringe. It is obvious that the kid took advantage of you while you were weak. Why would you be afraid of him? Are you still the Salas that we know?" Others may think that Han Shuo managed to defeat Salas because the latter was in a disadvantaged situation. But Salas knew that his defeat was not out of bad circumstances, and he knew better than anyone else just how terrifying Han Shuo's power was. Therefore, no matter how the person in the grave instigated him, Salas rejected the offer. He coldly replied, "Unless you can somehow guarantee that we have no chance of failure, I will not step up and fight him." The person in the grave went silent for a while as though he could not understand why Salas would be so wary of that kid. Moments later, after thinking about it carefully, he laughed mischievously and said, "Me, the hegemons of destruction and darkness, and you 4 overgods altogether." "Are you in?" Salas jolted. He stared at the grave puzzlingly and asked, "What grudges does the God Hunter Alliance have with him that the 3 of you would join forces to kill him?" One of my chiefs that I'm most impressed with called Han Hao betrayed me for this guy after he moved to the fringe. And back then, when he was in the Darkness Dominion, he led people into destroying one of our branches. And just days ago, he had wiped out our people in Ronson Canyon. His existence is severely threatening the interests of our God Hunter alliance. As you say, his strength improves rapidly. We need to get rid of him as soon as possible, replied the person in the grave in a sinister voice. He took a short pause before he continued. With the four of us, even Tyre will be dead without a doubt. So, are you in or not? Salas hesitated for a moment. He recalled the destruction of his Empyrean peak and hardened his heart. He shouted, "Fuck it! Fine, I'll do it." Chapter 912, Misty CGDK 912. Misty C1 was certain to step into the Misty Sea while traveling to the fringe from the Death Dominion. After traversing the Misty Sea and crossing two towering mountains, one would officially step out of the Death Dominion. The sea was called the Misty Sea because every inch of it was constantly shrouded by a thick mist connecting the surface of the sea to the sky. The mist was so thick and dense that even the most intense sunlight could not reach the sea. The vast ocean was home to innumerable bizarre and odd sea creatures. There were a number of non-human races that lived at the depths of the sea all year. They would never step ashore or interact with beings that lived on land. It was very easy to lose one's way in the Misty Sea. There was no monument or landmark for reference, but endless stretches of confusing whiteness. Gods traveling alone in the sea, without adequate strength, would most likely become prey to the god hunters and lose their lives in the Misty Sea. One day, while journeying home from the Death Dominion, Han Shuo finally came to the Misty Sea. He gazed at the endless whiteness that veiled the sea and noticed that the mist was much more intense than the last time he was there. In addition, he noticed that the elements of death and darkness were somewhat more intense than in the past. He was also surprised to discover that no god hunters were wandering aimlessly around the sea looking for prey. Months ago, while entering the Death Dominion, Han Shuo discovered many god hunters lurking in the Misty Sea. A few of them were even foolish enough to provoke him. After Han Shuo slaughtered those fools, he simply cast their bodies into the sea and gave the massive sea creatures a feast. Many god hunters would patrol the Misty Sea in groups. Thanks to the natural visual obstacle, no one could see them coming or avoid them. And once they run into a prey, they would attack in a group. If their prey turned out to be stronger, they could easily use the mist to escape. It was as though the ocean was made for god hunters. Soon after entering the Misty Sea, Han Shuo started going around and scanned the sea with his consciousness. He detected no life forms other than sea creatures. He thought that it was rather regrettable, and he found it a little strange. Along his journey home, Han Shuo had wiped out dozens of big and small god hunter factions. Following the information provided by Scarlet, he went to the regions that god hunters usually gathered and used his extraordinarily powerful soul-sensing power to find and hunt them. From Ronson Canyon to the Misty Sea, Han Shuo had killed more than 500 god hunters. With their divine souls, Cauldron of Myriad Demon had gained more than 500 demon generals. Han Shuo wasn't alarmed by the strange changes to the Misty Sea and continued his journey. As there were no god hunter to hunt, Han Shuo decided not to stay too long in the Misty Sea, for there was nothing for him to gain. He flew across the ocean at high speed. When he had traveled halfway into the ocean, his consciousness suddenly jolted. A sense of danger suddenly filled his heart. Han Shuo bunched his brows and suddenly halted. He first cleared his mind of random thoughts and focused his consciousness on the sensation that suddenly swarmed into his heart. After attaining the Skybreak realm in demonic arts, Han Shuo's consciousness had become extremely sensitive to impending dangers. Whenever that was a real danger looming, he could always sense it in advance and take the necessary actions to avert a disaster. When the sense of danger came to his heart, and after taking a moment to think, he immediately connected the dots. He realized that it wasn't a coincidence that brought so many usual changes to the Misty Sea. Han Shuo transformed his consciousness into hundreds of thousands of strands and spread them all around him while sending several dozens of demon generals from his body. They spread everywhere to look for the source of danger. "Who is it?" shouted Han Shuo, but there was no reply. After the latest advancement in his strength, Han Shuo possessed absolute confidence against any opponent, save for an over-god with the quintessence. Han Shuo ruled out the possibility that it was an over-god, as they were proud characters, and their pride wouldn't allow them to mount a sneak attack against anyone. Han Shuo's consciousness and demon general had extended to every corner of the Misty Sea, but had discovered nothing. However, not only was the sense of danger not disappearing, it was growing more and more intense. Han Shuo understood that his enemy must be somewhere in the Misty Sea. With one thought, Han Shuo withdrew his consciousness and demon generals back into his body. He let out a cold groan and continued flying away from the Misty Sea at an even greater speed. Han Shuo reasoned that if his enemy was hiding in the Misty Sea, then they must be planning to use the special features of the sea against him. They wouldn't want Han Shuo to leave the sea and will do everything they can to intercept him. Thus they will be forced to come out from hiding, revealing themselves. And Han Shuo was correct. When he tried leaving the Misty Sea at an even greater speed, the elements of death and darkness in the Misty Sea bizarrely started gathering. In an instant, the white mist transformed into black smoke. The aura of death started ravaging on the surface of the sea. It was mixed with the chilling sea breeze and spread to the entire sea within a short time. In an instant, Han Shuo detected that many layers of barriers were deployed around the Misty Sea, and they were converging towards him. After carefully sensing the gathering rate of the elements of death and darkness, Han Shuo's face jolted, and he was rather surprised. With his acute senses, judging from the gathering rate of the elements of death and darkness, Han Shuo was able to determine the number and strengths of his enemy. He knew that there were at least 2 overgods who cultivated the energy of death and darkness. Although they do not possess the quintessence, 2 overgods were still a very formidable power. When Han Shuo was about to say something, he suddenly discovered that the seawater below him was boiling. The dark seawater was filled with the energy of destruction. They were turning the seawater into solid, growing columns. It was an overgod of destruction. Han Shuo was astonished. He did not expect that there would be 3 overgods hiding in ambush. In the next instance, a stream of lightning bolts shot through the mists. It then split up into thousands of lightning bolts and weaved a giant net on the sky. Han Shuo was not familiar with the death, destruction, or the darkness auras. But Han Shuo was familiar with the aura on the lightning bolts and immediately figured out who deployed the lighting energy barrier. He raised his head, looked at the sky, and shouted, "So it turns out to be you, Salas. I must admit, I'm quite surprised that you could recover so quickly and even find 3 powerful assistants to assault me. You must have schemed long and hard for this." The majestic figure of Salas gradually appeared in the mist. He stared down at Han Shuo from high in the sky and put on a smirk. "Well, you got it wrong, kid. It's not me who planned the assault, it's the other 3. I'm just tagging along." Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment, and with one thought, he immediately understood the situation. He suddenly burst into laughter and said, "I see. It seems that my butchering of the God Hunters has finally provoked a counterattack from the high-ups. Haha, it's just that I did not expect the counterattack to be so fierce." Soon, a colossal figure gradually appeared from the dark. He had a pair of cold green eyes that looked as though 2 green crescent moons, staring down at Han Shuo. His terrifying aura of destruction seemed to be stirring the seawater, causing them to move around erratically. Next, the boundless darkness grew more and more intense. A massive dark figure enveloped by the most intense element of darkness gradually appeared. Only his vague outline could be seen. Shortly after, a throne made of bones appeared out of nowhere. A figure wearing a white mask, whose body was wrapped by an intense aura of death, sat on it. The aura of death was constantly moving around, giving the person an indefinite outline. The 3 overgods showed up one after another. They would wear a mask or hide under the darkness, not revealing their true appearances. It seemed the hegemons were very cautious about revealing their identities. After the 3 hegemons showed up, Han Shuo turned to the colossal figure and smilingly shouted, "Hey, it's you. I've seen you before." Back then, when Han Shuo lived in the City of Shadows, Han Shuo discovered a God Hunter Alliance base, and he brought Erebus, Ayabashi, and the others to flatten it. The colossal figure showed up in the underground palace in the base, and it nearly killed them all. And when Han Shuo was still immortal, when he was still on the profound continent, This massive figure had also appeared in the cemetery of death. It tried to make Han Shuo surrender his soul and become its slave. Han Shuo did not expect that after so many years, he would meet this overgod of destruction face to face in the misty sea. By now, Han Shuo could tell that the colossal figure was just a hallucination created to mask his real appearance. But as his strength was extremely terrifying, most experts cannot tell that it was a hallucination and thought that he was actually that massive. When facing such a colossal figure with such mighty energy, those who had weak minds would easily be intimidated and surrender their souls to serve him. Even Han Shuo back then was terrified of the colossal figure that seemed to wield infinite power. Indeed, we have met before. How unexpected! A character as insignificant as an ant could soar in strength in such little time, even to the point of threatening our alliance. A slow, aged voice sounded from the colossal figure. He sounded rather impressed. Chapter 913, Kaboom. Chapter 913. Kaboom. Had any of the four overgods attacked Han Shuo just decades earlier, he would have died without a doubt. But the Han Shuo now was a force to be reckoned with. The hegemons of the death, darkness, and destruction dominions, as well as a former sovereign Salas, must join forces just to get a shot at killing him. "There's no escape this time, Brian," shouted Salas. As Han Shuo had deployed demonic blood disassembly to escape from the city of gorging clouds just weeks earlier, he was not at his tip-top condition and cannot fight at peak performance. While sensing the mighty auras the four overgods emanated, Han Shuo accepted that he would have to fight a battle lopsided against him. Although Han Shuo could activate demonic blood disassembly and escape from the misty sea, using this escape technique again when such little time had passed would come with serious repercussions. If Han Shuo were to use the demonic blood disassembly to escape from this ambush, his demonic body will suffer injuries that he must take a much longer time to recover. This will mean that he won't be at his peak condition after returning to the fringe, putting himself under a risk he cannot accept given how treacherous sovereigns like Tyre and Log were. Han Shuo wore a dark face as he sensed the four menacing auras while racking his brain for an escape plan. "The four of us had prepared for this moment for a long time. Now that you are inside our trap, you can forget about leaving," said the colossal figure as he stared down at Han Shuo with his green eyes. Using the energy of destruction, he formed an enormous energy field around him and used it to alter the properties of the seawater, preventing Han Shuo from escaping by diving into the ocean. "What a shame, he could have been an excellent servant," remarked the masked overgod sitting on a white bone throne. He started approaching Han Shuo slowly, and the white bones that made his throne started glowing with a milky white halo. The grayish aura of death from the environment started gathering towards him. The other three overgods immediately started moving with great rapport. The four overgods slowly closed in on Han Shuo. The energies of death, darkness, destruction, and lightning slowly accumulated and flooded the misty sea. They unfolded their domains of divinity, causing the region to be devoid of all other elements. Four violent energies began compressing Han Shuo from the zenith, nadir, forward, and aft. The four must have detailedly discussed how they should trap and kill Han Shuo. They might have even practiced it beforehand. The four energies were perfectly joined up on their intersections and had sealed off every inch of space that Han Shuo could leave from while slowly converging, shrinking the area that Han Shuo could move. Han Shuo's mind jolted, and he immediately knew that he must not allow himself to be so passive in the battle. If he was to allow that four energies to converge, there will be no way that he could resist it. Though his consciousness may escape by splitting into millions of strands, his demonic body and the demonic infant would be destroyed. Immediately after, Han Shuo realized that he needed to stake his all, or he won't be leaving the misty sea in one piece. Han Shuo cursed it in his mind, and he no longer hesitated. The energies from thousands and thousands of demon generals suddenly gushed into his demonic body, boosting the already immense power his body possessed. He was determined to give an all-out fight. But this time, Han Shuo did not utilize the myriad demon transformation and fought using the demonic infant, even though it would grant him access to vast amounts of power. Although the situations were equally dire, what he was facing in the misty sea was different from what he had to face in the Broadhurst residence. Not only must he leave the Misty Sea as soon as possible, but he must also bring his physical body along. Back then in the city of gorging clouds, Han Xiuo needed to face only two overgod's forces. He knew that the black hole attack deployed by Yaris cannot injure his demonic infant. But now, in the Misty Sea, not only must Han Xiuo face four overgod experts, but most significantly, he will be fighting Salas, a cultivator of lightning energy. The energy of lightning was greatly damaging to lifeforms like demon generals and the demonic infant. The energy of lightning had always been the bane of incorporeal lifeforms. Although Han Xiuo was not afraid of the lightning energy from an ordinary god, Salas was no ordinary god. Han Xiuo was worried that his demonic infant would be injured once struck by Salas' overgod lightning energy. Therefore, Han Xiuo did not use the myriad demon transformation, but transferred the demon general energy to his physical body and temporarily boosted his strength. When the seemingly infinite amount of power gushed into every cell of Han Xiuo's body, his demeanor and even his attitude transformed. He suddenly raised his head at the sky and laughed like an unstoppable maniac. Meanwhile, the 17 flying swords emerged from his body and orbited him in bizarre trajectories. A chilling, sinister, wicked aura surged as radiances burst from those swords that were dragging long trails of lights. An instant later, the 17 flying swords suddenly overlapped into one, transforming into an enormous sword 5 meters wide and 100 meters long made of pure sword radiance. Deicide Slash, the second form of the Avicii god-slaying sword formation, took shape in an instant. Immediately, it went slashing at Salas, who was hovering high in the sky. The enormous sword made of pure power seemed unstoppable. It tore a hole in the field of lightning energy and viciously went after Salas. Salas cursed in his mind, there are 4 of us here, why must you fucking aim it at me? Salas had become afraid of Han Xiuo after having fought him at the Pandemonium. The fact that Salas did not immediately look for Han Xiuo after he had recovered from his injuries was a clear sign that Salas had no confidence fighting Han Xiuo one-on-one. Therefore, when he saw the enormous sword coming at him, he instinctively withdrew. Salas dared not withstand the ferocious Deicide Slash. He pulled back and tried to dodge the attack. With that, one of the 4 powers compressing at Han Xiuo was immediately weakened. "Salas, the fuck you doing? Take the attack," shouted the person on the white bone throne angrily when he saw Salas retreating. From his point of view, Han Xiuo's power was not enough to severely injure Salas in a single blow. He thought that as long as Salas would withstand Han Xiuo's attack for just a moment, the 3 of the hegemons could then divert some of their power to help Salas counteract the power of the Deicide Slash, and Han Xiuo will still be on course for complete annihilation. But Salas obviously did not think the same. He let out a cold groan and continued to dodge the Deicide Slash. When Salas retreated, Han Xiuo started moving. The demonic blades burst out from his fingers, and he flew upwards at the hole in Salas' barrier. "Oh no!" cried the hovering dark figure as colossal as a mountain. Orbs of destruction suddenly emerged from him and shot at Han Xiuo. It was as though pearly droplets were raining down on Han Xiuo. They came in large numbers and in dense swarms, not allowing Han Xiuo to dodge them. Han Xiuo's avatar of destruction also knew how to create orbs of destruction, and he understood that it was made by coagulating the divine energy of destruction. Those small orbs, despite their size, were extremely powerful and deadly. Han Xiuo's face slightly jolted when he saw those orbs of destruction pouring down on him like raindrops. With one thought, he sent out the pearls of annihilation he produced and sent them colliding into those orbs of destruction. A strand of his consciousness then activated the blood essences within those pearls, which caused the orbs of destruction to violently explode. The first wave of explosions seemed to have triggered a chain reaction, and the remaining orbs of destruction exploded. A series of long, world-shaking, eardrum-rupturing explosions sounded from the sky. While producing the pearls of annihilation, Han Xiuo had a novel idea and added a strand of his destruction divine energy into those pearls. The idea was to simultaneously ignite his pearls of annihilation with his orbs of destruction to create the maximum firepower. Han Xiuo had been wanting to test out the firepower, but he did not expect that instead of doing so with his own orbs of destruction, He would first do so on the Godhunter Alliance hegemons. As the remaining orbs exploded, it seemed to have destabilized the lightning energy barrier that Salas deployed. With that, the lightning energies also started exploding. The noise grew from eardrum rupturing to lung collapsing. The explosions lasted for a long, long while. When it finally stopped, the thick, dense mist above the misty sea was dissipating, and the garish sunlight managed to pierce through the atmosphere for the first time in eons. Sala's barrier got destroyed. "Daka, what the hell is wrong with you?" shouted the person on the white bone throne furiously. "The fuck would I know?" cried the colossal figure. "Daka, so your name is Daka," said Hanshu before he suddenly laughed out loud. After the mist dissipated, the blinding sunlight was allowed to fall onto the enormous hallucination, causing it to vanish and reveal an old man. The old man had winter-white hair and a wizened, heavily lined face, but his eyes were piercing and gleaming with life. After having a good laugh under the gaudy sun, Hanshu's figure blurred and suddenly fissioned into a dozen Hanshus. They simultaneously escaped in 12 directions. After Sala's barrier was destroyed, Hanshu was no longer trapped. He quickly flew out and made an escape without hesitation. The four overgods were confused when they discovered that the dozen of Hanshus were all indistinguishable from the real Hanshu. As they could not tell which of the Hanshus were hallucinations, they had no choice but to split up and randomly went after one of the escaping Hanshus. And after they pursued and killed the Hanshus, they found all remaining Hanshus had disappeared without a trace. He had vanished from the senses of their divine souls. Chapter 914, GDK 914. Running into an old friend, Salas, and the three hegemons reassembled at the center of the misty sea. They all wore dark faces. The four overgods had been setting up their traps and barriers all around the misty sea for days. They had even been practicing joining forces against Hanshu. But despite their long, careful planning and preparations, despite having Hanshu right in their palms, Hanshu still managed to slip through their fingers. If the outside world was to learn of their failure that day, they would have no reputation left. In the end, Salas had managed to dodge the deicide slash and not squander the slightest energy to resist it. When the orbs of destructions destroyed the barriers in the sky, Hanshu had the 17 flying swords return into his body so that he could escape with it. "This is all your fault, Salas. If you did not retreat, there is no way he could have escaped." As soon as the four overgod reassembled, the masked man on the white bone throne angrily started the blame game. Salas was not in a good mood either. He rebuked, "That's easy for you to say when you had not even fought him once. Had I taken that strike directly, I would have to spend at least hundreds of years to recover from the injuries." The hegemon of destruction named Daka looked at Salas before he turned to his fellow hegemons, nodded, and gravely said, "Dagmar, Acer, that youngster is definitely not easy to kill. Now is not the time to point fingers. What we should do now is to think of a way to finish him as soon as possible." After listening to those words, Dagmar, the hegemon of death, seemed to recall that they still needed Sala's knowledge of the Fringe for their invasion plan, and therefore did not further berate Salas. After thinking for a moment, Dagmar bunched his brows and said, "This youngster is indeed as sly as a fox. The four of us having failed to kill him today meant that it will be much harder to kill him in the future. But I still cannot understand. When he was escaping, he made a dozen hallucinations. All the hallucinations are indistinguishable from an actual god, and they even gave off divine auras, as though they all possessed souls. I cannot understand how he had managed to fool us." Dagmar, Acer, and Daka turned to Salas. Of the four, Salas knew Hanshu the best, and naturally, they would look at Salas for answers. He cultivates a bizarre energy that seems to allow him to manipulate souls. I don't know how, but I'm sure he could transform the souls he controls to take his appearance and aura. Salas pondered deeply for a moment before he continued. "Compared to the last time I met him, his strength has improved. Even until now, I have no clue what energy he cultivates. If we do not kill him soon, I'm afraid that there might come a day that it will take all 12 of your hegemons just to get a shot at killing him. Given his temperament, I doubt that he would let you off easily, especially after what you've tried on him today. Have you thought of a countermeasure, Salas?" asked Daka in a grave face. He felt that Salas was not exaggerating, and he vaguely felt that Han Shuo was becoming the greatest threat to the God Hunter alliance. He may run and hide, but not those he cared deeply about. All of them live in a place in the fringe called Pandemonium. If we siege that place, he will have no choice but to show up and fight, answered Salas after thinking for a while. Wonderful. As long as he has people that he cares about, then he is vulnerable. Dagmar put on a sinister smirk and said, "Well, we are going to invade the fringe anyway. We could end him along the way. Salas, you still remember what you've promised us, right? If I cannot have it, then no one will. Go ahead and destroy it. I care not," replied Salas. As a former sovereign, Salas had a good understanding of the terrain and forces distribution of the fringe. With his assistance, the God Hunter Alliance's invasion of the fringe will be buttery smooth. Very well. I will contact the other hegemons and discuss how we should take down the fringe, said Acer, the hegemon of darkness. The four overgods had a brief discussion and left the misty sea that was no longer misty. Han Shuo heaved a sigh of relief after having freed himself from the trap laid by four overgod. Had Salas not dodged his deicide slash and taken the blow directly, Han Shuo would have a very hard time escaping from their barriers. Once the four barriers were compressed to a certain degree, with the energy in his body bound by four overgod energies, Han Shuo might not even be able to deploy demonic blood disassembly to escape. Of the four overgods, Han Shuo could sense that Salas was the weakest. The three God Hunter Alliance hegemons possessed extremely formidable strengths. This was especially true with Hegemon Daka. His true strength might not be weaker than Sovereign Tyre of the Fringe. Had Han Shuo not made use of psychology, exploiting Sala's fear of him, quick-witted used the Pearls of Annihilation to trigger Daka's Orbs of Destruction, and sacrificing a few spirit demons, his life might have ended on the Misty Sea that day. The God Hunter Alliance is indeed a force to be reckoned with. If Salas is associating with them, they will surely try to invade the Fringe. It appears that the peaceful days of the Fringe will soon be over, muttered Han Shuo under his breath after thinking about Sala's appearance with the hegemons. He thought that he should return to the Fringe as soon as possible to prepare for the impending war. "Oh!" exclaimed Han Shuo in surprise. He suddenly sensed a familiar life aura in the distance. Han Shuo had now stepped out of the Death Dominion and was heading for the Space Dominion through a remote region. He was currently on a vast mountain range between the Space and Death Dominions. When Han Shuo detected the pulse of life aura, he calmly sensed it for a moment. Joy suddenly appeared on his face. The Han Shuo now could remember the soul signature of those he had met, and he could detect the energy wave naturally emanated by a soul within a certain range. That was one of the countless abilities of the consciousness. Han Shuo was delighted because the soul signature he detected belonged to Donna. Han Shuo also detected many life auras around her, but he couldn't care less. Without thinking, Han Shuo immediately flew in her direction. Donna seemed to be entering the Death Dominion from the Space Dominion and was traveling in the exact opposite direction that Han Shuo was going. Therefore, Han Shuo reached them in no time. Ahem! Han Shuo suddenly appeared standing before Donna. He looked around at Felder, Dolers, and other members of the Lavers family. He seemed rather awkward. The House of Lavers had been declining since the day Han Shuo stepped into the City of Shadows. Not only were they ousted from the City of Shadows, but they also had to flee from Larixen soon after they found refuge in the City of Gorging Clouds because of Han Shuo. It was as though Han Shuo was the Lavers family's bane. It was obvious that the members of the Lavers family did not have an easy time. Not just Donna, but every member of the family clan seemed tired and exhausted. Their eyes, however, were still glistening with ambitious lights. It was as though their body were driven by an unknown willpower. But the Lavers turned despaired when Han Shuo suddenly appeared. Felder, who was leading his family clan, was jolted and stepped backward in fright. In a bitter smile, "Truly, I did not expect that you could locate us on such a remote path. It seems that this will be the end of us Lavers." Unlike Hoffs and Wallace, the House of Lavers, who had been hiding in the Fantasia City of the Space Dominion, due to its close proximity to the Fringe, they managed to learn a thing or two about Han Shuo's achievements in the Fringe. In addition, they were aware of the shocking news that came from the Death and Darkness Dominions recently. They knew just how terrifying Han Shuo's current strength was. Felder was on his journey back to the Darkness Dominion to take the place of Hofs as the new city lord of Hushville City. He was filled with hope and thought that his Lavers family would finally have a new beginning. But now, Han Shu found them and everything is over. He felt utterly defeated. Other than Donna, every member of the Lavers family looked at Han Shu with frightened faces. Some of those with weaker minds even shat their pants and begged, "Please, please spare us. Look at us, we haven't lived a day without misery. Have you not punished us enough? Please let us live." "Don't beg him, even if we die, we will die with honor," reprimanded Felder. With a staunch look on his face, he said to Han Shu, "It is indeed me who assaulted you with Larixin at Soaring Cloud Mountain Range. I know you've figured it out. Come, carry on and exterminate us. I won't make a flinch." Han Shu lightly sighed and replied, "Let bygones be bygones. I won't do any harm to your house of Lavers. I did not deliberately look for you guys. I just happened to pass through this area and sensed Donna's aura. I wished only to talk to her. You don't have to be so nervous." Felder was astounded and seemed baffled after hearing those words. He looked at Han Shu puzzlingly and asked, "I don't understand. With your power now, you could exterminate us with a snap. Why would you suddenly let us off now?" "All along, I've never initiated any hostility towards your House of Lavers. I merely reacted to your attacks. Had Avery not tried to kill me over and over again, I wouldn't have killed him. And I've never asked the House of Saint to chase you away from the City of Shadows. It was Avery's attempt in killing Carmelita that led to it. I have always been fair to your family clan, and I say that with a clear conscience." Due to all sorts of reasons and circumstances, Han Shu did not have the chance to have a discussion with Felder. But now he could finally justify his actions before his victims. "Brian, let's talk, alone," proposed Donna suddenly. Han Shu took a deep breath and nodded. He and Donna walked into one of the jungles in the mountain range. Chapter 915. Forcing a Confession. Chapter 915. Forcing a confession. As soon as Han Shu and Donna were away, Dolers went to Felder and whispered, "Patriarch, you should use the divine brand that the Overgod has bestowed upon you and inform his lordship that Brian is here. Perhaps the Dark Lord could descend here and finish Brian." Dolers kept his voice very low, as though he was afraid that Han Shu, who had disappeared into a forest with Donna, could hear him. Those members of the Laver family, who had previously begged Han Shu to spare their lives, immediately had their eyes lit up after hearing Dolers' proposal and voiced their agreement, hoping that Felder would immediately summon the Overgod of Darkness to kill Han Shu. Felder bunched his brows at Dolers and angrily said, "You want us Lavers exterminated?" Dolers was taken aback. He was surprised by Felder's reaction to his proposal, and he hastily replied, "No, Patriarch. I do not understand. Why would that be such a bad idea?" Felder looked at other members of the Lavers who were also puzzled before he groaned and answered in a deep voice, "If the Dark Lord wanted Brian dead, you think he could have walked out from the Darkness Dominion alive?" Dolers became even more astonished. "Patriarch, you mean to say that the Overgod of Darkness had meant to let him escape? How is that possible? Hofs and Wallace were city lord of the Darkness Dominion. Why would the Darkness Overgod spare Brian's life after he killed two of the most important characters in his dominion?" Felder put on a disdained look and replied, "You have never been in the presence of the Overgod, and you will never understand his might. Although I do not know why the Dark Lord did not kill him, I'm certain that if his lordship wanted, Brian would already be dead long before he could step out from his dominion." Dolers was overwhelmed with shock and was rendered speechless momentarily by that bombshell. Felder then let out another cold groan and said, "You better give up on even touching him as soon as possible. And speaking of Brian, we might even have to thank him for our return to the Darkness Dominion. Given our family's condition and strength, I'm far from being qualified to be the city lord of Hushville City. I suspect that the Overgod's decision might have something to do with Brian." Dolers was overwhelmed with shock, and it seemed as though that was too much of a revelation for him to digest. He mumbled in disbelief, "Impossible, this is impossible. Why would an Overgod, one of the most powerful beings in the universe, give thought to such a puny character? How would we know?" Felder suddenly looked at the ground, shook his head, and sighed. He lamented, "If I knew that Brian possessed such great powers, I would have personally welcomed him the day he first stepped into the Laver's residence." Sigh indeed, Donna's foresight is light years ahead of ours. If I had listened to her advice, perhaps our Lavers family wouldn't have declined but soared meteorically. Pa Patriarch, have you gave up on avenging Uncle Avery's death? Asked Dolores stammeringly after hesitating for a while. Avenge? Felder took a glance at the thick forest that Han Shuo and Donna went before he yet again sighed. He turned back to Dolores and replied, Yaris, Darkwater, Darkstone, Hoffs, and Wallace, almost every city lord of the Darkness Dominion and a bunch of high gods joined forces and tried to kill him. But in the end, they failed and it cost Hoffs, Wallace, and Larrickson their lives. So, tell me, how would we get our revenge? Who among our House of Lavers are capable of that? But, Dolores had words to say but was choked by the brutal reality. Felder interrupted and sternly instructed, You all better give up on the idea as soon as possible. When we are at Hushville City, focus on performing your duties. Don't even fantasize about attacking Brian, or you will bring calamity upon our House of Lavers. Remember that by heart. Dolores and other members of the House of Lavers found the instruction hard to accept, but their patriarch was not giving them any room for rejection. They nodded and promised to obey his instruction. Inside a thick jungle with verdant and lush vegetation, where the ground was covered with beautiful flowers emanating faint fragrances. Among those flowers stood a most outstanding, captivating, lovely beauty, wearing a light purple dress that not in the least concealed the beautiful curves of her body and her long, slender legs. There was a tinge of sorrow on her rosy white cheeks that would invite sympathy from anyone. When standing before Donna, Han Shu felt as though he had a million words to say, but no words could come out of his mouth. In the end, he let out a long sigh and said, It's been a while, Donna. Donna turned her bright eyes to Han Shu and stared foolishly at him for a moment. This youngster, who used to hide his light under a bushel and came to the Elysium with nothing, had become one of the most outstanding characters in the world and possessed great influence. Not only was he a sovereign on the most hazardous land of Elysium, but he had also fought against the most powerful city lords of the Darkness Dominion and escaped from their trap. In just a short few decades, from a nobody, he had become one of the most outstanding beings on Elysium. His strength was so valiant that many city lords of the Divine Dominions were intimidated by his name. Even though Donna knew from day one that Han Shu would eventually rise to great success, the heights he had achieved this day was still far beyond her imagination. Brian, I truly did not expect that you would accomplish what you have today, said Donna in a somewhat forced smile. It wasn't as bright and charming Han Shuo remembered. Han Shuo stared awkwardly for a moment, thinking for something to talk about before he asked, Donna, where are you all going? We are returning to the Darkness Dominion. The Darkness Overgod has bestowed a divine brand upon my father and commanded him to head to Hushville City and be the city lord, replied Donna straightforwardly. Oh, I see. It's great that you all are benefiting from Hoff's death, haha. Right, what about the City of Shadows? Who will be the new city lord? Han Shu did not expect that the Darkness Overgod would bestow the position upon Felder. Andre of the House of Saint, replied Donna. That is wonderful. He is absolutely suited for the position. Although Wallace was a capable city lord, he was too intolerant of competition and would drive talents out from the city, hindering the city from growing. I'm sure that under Andre's management, the City of Shadows will prosper, remarked Han Shu smilingly. Donna bunched her long, slender brows slightly and stared at Han Shuo intensely without saying a word. It made Han Shuo really uncomfortable. For some reason, Han Shuo felt rather flustered under Donna's gaze. It had nothing to do with strength. It was a mixed emotion of guilt, a shred of excitement, and anxiousness. After keeping silent for a while, Donna took a deep breath, lifting her buxom breasts, and the tight clothing seemed as though it was going to rip up. She stared at Han Shuo with her bright eyes without blinking. As though having garnered enough courage, she finally asked, Why did you kill him? Although Donna did not speak the name, Han Shuo instantly knew exactly who she was referring to. Han Shuo somehow panicked, and his heart seemed to be beating uncontrollably. He rather frantically said, That guy is a degenerate and had not done a single good in his life. He is not worthy of you. As your friend, I cannot stand and watch your future be destroyed. As he spoke, as though he found an excuse for himself, his tone turned from flustered to righteous. But Donna kept staring at him with her piercing eyes. She just stared intently without saying a word. For some reason, Han Shuo felt as though Donna could see through him. He dared not to look at Donna in the eye and avoided her gaze. After a long while, a tip of Donna's lip curved to make a half smile, and she somewhat mockingly said, "How righteous of you, Brian. Really? You did not kill him for any personal reasons? None at all." Han Shuo's mind was frozen. He suddenly recalled how he felt after killing Larixen's son. It felt liberating and satisfying, as though knowing that he had resecured something that belonged to him, preventing it from falling into others' hands. In his subconscious mind, he had done it all for himself. "I have read your mind, haven't I?" Donna sneered. "Brian, you are the most selfish person, and everything you do, it is for yourself. You knew the dire consequences for me and my Laver's family if he was murdered, and yet you carried on. You did not do it for me, but for yourself." For myself," Han Shuo mumbled and asked, "Why? What would I get?" "Because in your heart, I'm your property. Even when you're not occupying it, you wouldn't let anyone have it." Donna suddenly stepped forward, grabbed Han Shuo's lapel, and forced Han Shuo to look her in the eye. In a ferocious look, and angrily said, "Speak, are those your thoughts?" I don't know." It was the first time that Han Shuo was treated by a woman in this way. He was somewhat at a loss, and he felt as though he was caught with his pants down. All of a sudden, Han Shuo sensed that his demonic infant was kicking and punching erratically. His Skybreak realm state destabilizing, and even the demonic yuan in his body becoming disordered. Han Shuo was astounded, and he realized that the whole shebang with Donna had unwittingly evolved into a mental barrier, for he had not been truthful to himself. A series of thoughts rapidly went through his mind before Han Shuo suddenly clenched his teeth, embraced Donna, and confessed, "Yes, those are exactly my thoughts. You are mine, and I will not let anyone other than myself lay a finger on my woman. I'm selfish and possessive. What are you gonna do?" Tears suddenly filled her eyes. Donna returned the embrace with all her strength, buried her face in Han Shuo's expansive chest, and started crying. She had been waiting to hear those words for ages. Chapter 916. Not letting you off. GDK 916. Not letting you off. All along, Han Shuo had been denying his feelings for Donna, trying not to increase the size of his harem. But in the depths of his heart, just as Donna said, he had considered her as his woman, and his actions reflected his subconscious mind. On that day, with Donna's interrogation, Han Shuo was forced to confront his true feelings. When Han Shuo observed that his realm state was destabilizing, he realized just how deeply he felt for Donna and that he must stop burying his feelings. Although Donna was confrontational, and it seemed as though she was going to kill Han Shuo, all her anger vanished when she was in Han Shuo's embrace. Every last bit of pain and hatred were erased off her mind. The weeping Donna embraced Han Shuo tightly as though she wanted to squeeze herself into Han Shuo's body. Han Shuo felt sympathetic. He stood silently and let Donna cry on his chest while gently caressing her soft, long hair. As the grief and grievances that had been accumulated over the past many years went away with her tears, her heart gradually calmed down. For all these years, having to constantly move around and hide with her family, there had not been a day that she felt at peace. But in Han Shuo's broad chest, she felt safe and a sense of tranquility. How I wish I could lean on his chest for eternity. I thought Donna, who had put on a faint, blissful smile after she stopped weeping. Happiness had displaced all the sorrow in her heart. After a long while, after having vented her feelings, she moved away from Han Shuo's chest somewhat embarrassedly. With her wet eyes, she saw that Han Shuo seemed rather nervous and somewhat at a loss. She thought that the Han Shuo now was very adorable. There wasn't a hint of his usual proud and lofty demeanor showing on his foolish face. He. Donna, whose cheeks were still wet, couldn't help but laughed. She reached out with her hand and gently pinched Han Shuo's face. "Why would you make this silly face? You make it look like I had forced you to confess." Han Shuo forced a smile and thought, well, but you did force me to confess, right?" But Han Shuo was glad that the hidden knot in his heart had been untied. Han Shuo still felt somewhat embarrassed and therefore avoided Donna's eyes and lowered his head slightly. When his gaze moved downward, it suddenly stopped and turned to fixed when it came across Donna's massive bosom. The front area of Donna's dress had soaked up most of her tears. When her thin garment was dampened, They became semi-transparent and stuck closely to her breasts. It looked almost as though she was not wearing anything. The mesmerizing, enchanting curves of her giant globes were exposed. Donna was curvaceous and busty, to begin with. After seeing her almost bare breasts, Han Shu couldn't move his gaze away. Perhaps having noticed Han Shu's gaze, Donna put on a faint smirk and stretched her body. When her arms stretched backward, her chest was raised and the tip of her soft, plump bosom gently rubbed against Han Shu's chest for a brief moment. Blazing light instantly burst from Han Shu's eyes, and steam could be seen escaping from his ears. Hee hee! Donna laughed mischievously and stood upright before she joyfully said, "Brian, I'll stop teasing you. I need to get going as soon as possible, but I'll look for you soon." All thoughts left Han Shu's mind when he heard that Donna was leaving. He hastily grabbed Donna with a hand and asked, "You are going to Hushville City?" "Yup. The Darkness Overgod has appointed my father to manage Hushville City. This is a once-in-a-blue-moon opportunity for my family clan. We need to make good use of this opportunity to restore our former glory. Sai, my family clan is already very weak now, and we are lacking manpower. I cannot leave my dad at such a critical time," explained Donna. Then, what about us?" asked Han Shu stammeringly. Donna placed her hand on Han Shu's cheek, put on a sweet smile, and tenderly said, "I will look for you soon. You have destroyed my life, and for that, I'm not letting you off forever." Han Shu heaved a sigh of relief and replied, "Then I can be at ease." "All right, go and do whatever you should be doing. I know that you are at the fringe. As soon as my Lavers family have established ourselves in Hushville City, I will come for you," said Donna smilingly. Then, as though having recalled something, she giggled and said, "But by then, I am counting on you to pacify your other girlfriends. I'm afraid that they will murder me or something." "All right then, take care of yourself. I will be waiting for you," said Han Shu smilingly before he suddenly went forward, grabbed Donna into his arms, and went in for a nice long kiss before she could react. Woo-hoo, he then went on his way while cheering happily. Donna stomped her feet while blushing and pouting. "You cheeky little rascal," she murmured before tucking her lips inwards and licked them as though trying to savor and preserve Han Shu's mark in her heart. When the members of the Lavers family were on the brink of losing their patience, Donna finally re-emerged from the forest. Before entering the forest with Han Shu, Donna's eyes were filled with hatred and anger. Even Felder was worried that Donna might try to attack Han Shu and worried that something might happen to her. But unexpectedly, not only did she return safe and sound, she came back full of energy, and not a trace of gloom could be seen. The difference was night and day. The Lavers family were stunned and puzzled. They couldn't understand what happened to her in the forest or how the spiritless Donna could turn, alive, in less than half an hour. Felder looked deeply at Donna and he seemed to make out something. He raised a brow and asked, "Where is he?" "He left. He's returning to the fringe." Donna had done her best to conceal the happiness on her face, but she could not conceal it in her voice. Anyone could observe that her demeanor had transformed. "Oh, okay." Felder nodded before he glanced at the members of his family clan and instructed, "Why are you all still standing? Get moving." Dolers and the others hastily replied affirmatively and continued with the journey. But they would secretly peek at Donna and gossip about her in their minds. Felder and Donna were traveling at the very front of the company. After they had pulled some distance ahead of the others, Felder softly said, "Donna, I will do nothing about the matter between you and him, but as always, try to avoid troubles for our family." Donna stared blankly for a moment before she puzzlingly asked, "Father, you won't make me break up with him?" Felder lightly sighed before he replied, "Could I?" "Father, actually I." Donna hastily tried to explain that she understood the position of her family clan as Han Shu, and the Lavers could still be considered enemies. Felder raised a hand and interrupted Donna. "There's no need for explanation. This is all my fault. I had failed you. If I had listened to you, and at least met him the day he first visited our Lavers' residence, perhaps none of those things would have happened. Sai, it was with my arrogance and stubbornness that I had pushed the House of Lavers into the abyss. I had even nearly sacrificed you to that good-for-nothing son of Larixin. Father, why don't you expel me from the Lavers? Then I cannot bring the family clan any troubles," suggested Donna. Felder shook his head resolutely and replied, "No, it is me who is in the wrong. Why would I punish you for my mistakes? All right, that's enough, don't overthink. Although I do not know why, I suspect that the darkness and death over gods want him to live. With that, the thing between you and him shouldn't be an issue. Father, do you mean you approve of our relationship? Donna was so elated that her voice trembled slightly. Felder nodded slowly, sighed, and lamented. I had not treated you fairly and had made you suffer too much for our family. Though I may have been a good patriarch, I had not been a good father. This is the least I could do to make it up for you. Thank you, father, thank you. Donna could not be happier. She thought that after Han Shuo killed Avery, Felder's brother, the grudges between Han Shuo and her family clan will never be resolved. But unexpectedly, Felder would let go of the offense and approve of her relationship with Han Shuo. With those words of Felder's, there were no longer any knots in her heart. Chapter 917. Do me a favor, GDK 917. Do me a favor. Ever since Baum was executed, and McKinley replaced him as the city lord of Ethereal City, the city had been rapidly improving in terms of commerce and combat capability. One of McKinley's first acts as the city lord was to reduce the taxations on all kinds of trades. He would also maintain the city's economic and political system, where there is minimal government involvement in certain areas of public policy and the private sector. All those who came in peace were allowed into the Ethereal City. McKinley had proved to be much more capable than Baum. Not only was he great at management, but he was also great at rallying support, with nearly every family, clans, and merchants in the city approved of his governance. Those divine guards who had previously served Baum had all realigned their allegiance to McKinley and served him well. With the generous support of the city lord, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy and Goldstone Enterprise became the largest businesses of their respective sector in Ethereal City. They had dominated the market. Emily, Phoebe, and the others had been living in Ethereal City for a while, and they were given the best treatment by McKinley, the city lord. They truly felt as though they were VVIP guests. Unlike the City of Shadows, the regulations in Ethereal City were much laxer, and the experts living there cultivated a far more diverse type of energy. Not only was it a more livable city, but it was also far more prosperous than the City of Shadows. With McKinley's assistance and Emily and Phoebe's expertise in running a business, the House of Han's Celestial Pearl Pharmacy and the Goldstone Enterprise rapidly dominated the market, crushing a majority of their competitions and becoming monopolies of medicines and energy crystals in Ethereal City. In the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, Phoebe, Emily, Sanguis, Bollins, and the others gathered for a regular meeting. Ethereal City is truly a wonderful place, but Brian has said that the Fringe is where we belong. We won't be staying here for too long, so there is no need to put too much effort into improving this place, said Stratham smilingly. The Han family had been living in great comfort and security. They could feel that McKinley was treating them with utmost sincerity based on their past experiences. I have no words but praises for McKinley. I even feel like he is being overly kind towards us. Despite the constant pressure from those merchants and criticism of him being biased, he still refuses to tax our businesses anything. What a guy, said Phoebe smilingly. She felt as though Ethereal City was her massive playground where she could do what she was best at. But we must not be presumptuous lest we cause McKinley troubles. In any case, Ethereal City will not be our home. As soon as Brian returns, we will head to the Fringe, remarked Emily, who wished to reciprocate McKinley's kindness. Why haven't Master returned by now? I wonder how he is doing, said Sanguis, who seemed rather worried. Upon hearing those words, the party turned silent. They understood that Han Shu's murder of City Lord Hill meant a great likelihood that he will have to face the wrath of the Overgod of Death. To them, the Death Overgod was an unimaginable, powerful existence. The longer they lived on Elysium, the more the idea was reinforced in their minds. Although they were confident in Han Shuo, when they recalled that Han Shuo might have to face a practically invincible existence, they would still feel worried about his safety. Don't worry, Master will be all right. Even if he cannot fight an Overgod, he should have no trouble escaping. Gilbert remained blindly convinced in Han Shuo's power, as he always does. He wasn't worried about Han Shuo's safety at all. An Overgod with the quintessence possesses the purest of their fundamental force. In the entire universe, there are just 12 of them. Their might is certainly way beyond the limits of our imagination, thus we cannot speculate anything. All we can do is hope that our patriarch is all right, remarked Bollins after letting out a sigh. He seemed somewhat worried. All right, you guys can stop worrying now. Pack up your stuff, cuz we will be going to the fringe, said Han Shu after his majestic figure abruptly materialized in the room in an instant. Brian, I'm glad you're all right. What happened? Asked Emily hastily. Hill, Hoffs, Wallace, Larix, and Ralph, they are all dead. Han Shuo put on a smile, looked at the party before he remarked, It seems that McKinley has been treating you well. Definitely. Compared to how we were treated in Witherbone City, this place is simply heaven, said Stratham in a faint smile. He seemed to like the place. Sanguis, Emily, Phoebe, and the others cheered when they heard that Hill and the others had been murdered. They were the mortal enemies of the House of Han, and them being dead can only be good for their reputation and future. They would also have less hidden threats to worry about. All right, you guys should start packing. I'll pay McKinley a visit, and after that, we will begin our journey to the fringe. No matter how great Ethereal City is, in the end, it is someone else's land. In the fringe, however, we get to be the true landlords. I'm sure that when you've seen the pandemonium, you will love the place just as much, said Han Shu smilingly before abruptly vanishing. In the city lord's mansion of Ethereal City, McKinley, who was meditating in his gymnasium, suddenly put on a big smile. He was glad to see Han Shu, who had suddenly shown up in front of him. Brian, you'd finally visit me. McKinley's demeanor had transformed. The gloom that he had accumulated over millennia of being trapped had been erased, and he seemed energetic and in high spirits. He was very satisfied with being the city lord of Ethereal City. You seem to be doing pretty well and your strength has improved. So, when will you break through to the Overgod realm? Asked Han Shuo jokingly. Han Shuo and McKinley had been keeping in touch for the past many years. Although they rarely met up, thanks to the proximity of Ethereal City with the fringe, they had been writing to each other frequently. Han Shuo was aware of McKinley's situation in Ethereal City, and McKinley knew what Han Shuo had been doing in the fringe. No matter how quickly my strength is advancing, I'll still be a snail when compared to you. McKinley laughed heartily before he remarked, I still remember how weak you were back on Profound Continent. But who could have expected that you would advance to such a great realm in less than 100 years after coming to Elysium? What a freak you are. I'll be taking my family to the fringe soon. Any progress on those devices you promised you'd make for me? Asked Han Shuo. I've got them ready for you long ago. McKinley smiled and a space ring flew towards Han Shuo before he named the devices. Magical Mirror, Portal Scroll, Spatial Disruptor. He also informed Han Shuo on how to operate those devices. The Magical Mirror was a communication device that could allow people separated by vast distances to communicate, which will be very useful for Han Shuo's intelligence collection in the fringe. Portal Scroll was a wonderful tool for escaping. Han Shuo may not need one, but if his family members had a portal scroll, they could escape from dangers by using the spacetime tearing device. It would greatly increase their chances of survival. As the name implied, Spatial Disruptor was a device for disrupting spacetime. An average space edict expert or a resourceful person with a portal scroll could usually escape by tearing spacetime. With a spatial disruptor, the Han family members could prevent their victims from escaping with that method. Other than the 3 devices, Han Shuo also received several other kinds of devices that only a space edict cultivator could produce. Some of them were even useful for Han Shuo. Nice, fantastic, thanks a lot. Han Shuo felt and scanned the space ring in his hand. He detected magical mirrors, portal scrolls, and other space edict devices numbered at a few dozens each. It was more than enough for his family members. Right, Brian, I heard that you have caused havoc in the city of Gorging Clouds and fought Yaris. Is that right? Asked McKinley suddenly. He seemed unusually interested in the matter. Han Shuo nodded and smilingly replied, Yep. I can confirm the rumors that Yaris has attained Overgod realm is true. He is a decent, honorable guy. I'd be more than happy to have him as a friend, but too bad, we can only be enemies because I killed his brother Larixon. McKinley laughed while shaking his head as though in a loss for words. Then, after thinking for a moment in a somewhat embarrassed manner, he asked Han Shuo, Brian, can I ask you for a favor? Han Shuo stared blankly for a split second before he smilingly replied, "Of course, there's no need to hesitate between us. Just tell me what it is, and you can consider it done. I would even murder and plunder for you." McKinley's glistened. He seemed touched by Han Shuo's words. He kept silent for a moment before he asked, "As you should know, it was Jayal, one of the keepers of the light, who had separated my divine soul from my divine body. I want revenge, and I hope that you can assist me." Jayal was one of the 3 keepers of the light, the most pious disciple of the god of light. He had attained late-stage high god strength many years ago, and McKinley was no match against him. He needed at least an assistance to defeat Jayal, and Han Shuo was the most suitable candidate. "No problem, just let me know where and when," agreed Han Shuo without thinking. "Thank you. I will let you know when I've located Jayal." McKinley thanked Han Shuo solemnly. "Sure, I will be waiting for your message. All right, time for me to return to the fringe," said Han Shuo smilingly, and he vanished without exchanging pleasantries. Chapter 918, You Dare? GDK 918, You Dare? Not much had changed in the fringe during Han Shuo's absence. Murder, plundering, massacre, rape continued to happen as it always does in the land of chaos. Big and small-scale battles could be easily found in the perimeter of the fringe. The big and small factions took notice as soon as the House of Han stepped into the fringe. But when they noticed that the person leading them was Han Shuo, they scuttled and ran as far as they could. Han Shuo was just too infamous in the fringe, and no one dared offend him. Sanguis, Ballins, and Gilbert were as though apex predators that were introduced to a flock of lamb. They would often venture away from the company by themselves, away from Han Shuo's protection, and return with scratches and injuries. The 3 who cultivated demonic arts understood that they must temper themselves by bloodshed if they want to rapidly raise their strengths, and that the fringe was the place most suitable for them to do so. The more they fight, the stronger they become. Sometimes they would strike together, and sometimes they would go alone. They would only attack forces that weren't too strong and improve their strengths through the death of their victims. Han Shuo had allowed them to venture around by themselves, for he knew that the 3 had decent strengths and were very treacherous. The injuries that they suffered were minor, and they would completely recover in 1 or 2 days. He thought that it was unlikely for them to be defeated by forces in the fringe. After making a few assaults by themselves, they started bringing a few squadrons of the House of Han guards with them. Those House of Han guards who had been tempered for ages were bloodthirst as well. With those guards, they were able to destroy many more forces along their way. Many of the forces would avoid them. "The fringe doesn't seem as frightening as what they've told us. All those we have met aren't all that powerful," remarked Sanguis, who had been in high spirits for the last few days. After killing a mid-stage high god in a duel, his confidence swelled. He had become rather overconfident. "Haha, we are just too strong, for the fringe is truly chaotic. Not only there are large-scale battles everywhere, each fringe dweller is fiercer than the next. This is truly a wonderful place, most suitable for our House of Han," said Gilbert. He was also feeling very delighted, for he could finally unleash the energy in his body and kill to his heart's content. It was obvious that he liked the fringe very much. Ballins, however, wasn't having their overconfidence. He swept his cold glance at the 2 and said, "The fringe is infamous on the Elysium for its perilousness. The most dangerous and treacherous criminals from all 12 dominions are in this land. We have not met any truly formidable enemy because we have not stepped into the deeper parts of the fringe, and those true powerhouses knew of our origins. They are afraid of our patriarch's power, and therefore have been avoiding us. Don't be so presumptuous to think that the fringe is nothing dangerous and drop your guard." Ballins had considered the 2 as his closest friends ever since what they had gone through in Witherbone City. Otherwise, had it been somebody else, Ballins would only coldly puff in disdain instead of giving a lengthy, insightful lecture. Sanguis and Gilbert, being young and reckless, did not take the advice to heart. Sanguis smiled mischievously and said, "What you said does somewhat make sense. But I still think that other than the 4 sovereigns, there aren't any other particularly strong forces in the fringe. I'm sure that even without using Master's reputation, we could still establish ourselves in the fringe." "That's right. The leaders of most forces possess just early-stage high god strength, nothing remarkable. The three of us in addition to 50 guards could easily gain a footing. Right, why don't we head to the Omphalos first? I believe that we can easily reach the center by ourselves, suggested Gilbert excitedly. Sangui's eyes lit up and he enthusiastically agreed. That's right, we should get there before the others. With Master protecting them, our matriarchs and the others would be just fine without us. No. If any bad thing happens, how would I explain myself to senior brother? Ballins bunched his brows and rejected the proposal without thinking. Come on, old guy, don't be so paranoid, it will be just fine. Come on, let's go. We will wait for them in the Omphalos. After all, we have figured out the general direction. Sanguis laughed heartily and proceeded with the plan, belittling the dangers ahead of him. Gilbert laughed mischievously, went and pulled Ballins as he said, It's all right, Master will not be angry at us for doing so. Come on, don't spoil the mood. If Sanguis and Gilbert had not tried to risk their lives to stand up for Ballins in Witherbone City, Ballins definitely would have decisively halted them and brought them back to the company. But Ballins now considered Sanguis and Gilbert as people he trusted the most after Han Shuo. Seeing their enthusiasm, Ballins felt rather reluctant to spoil the mood. After hesitating for a moment with Gilbert dragging him, Ballins went along despite his gut feeling telling him no. With that, Sanguis, Gilbert, Ballins, and 50 House of Han guards, separated from the main House of Han company, began heading to the center of the fringe, the Omphalos. At first, they had run into relatively small forces that were led by early or mid-stage high gods. With Sanguis, Ballins, and Gilbert easily defeating those high god leaders and the terrifying team combat strength of the House of Han guards, the party was able to easily crush their enemies and went deep into the fringe without much resistance. Sanguis and Gilbert became even more excited and overconfident. They had forgotten of the fact that the deeper they venture into the fringe, the more dangerous it would be. They would shout and cheer along their journey. But their streak was about to come to an end. When they got very far from the main company of the House of Han, some of the major and ferocious forces deep in the fringe took notice of them. They were not aware of their association with Han Shuo, due to the distance, and Gilbert, and the others had even avoided revealing their association with Han Shuo because they wanted to prove their power. Finally, a group of fringe dwellers led by a late-stage high god expert intercepted them on a mountain. And there was more than one late-stage high god. The enemy forces were made of one late-stage high god of death, one late-stage high god of wind, a number of early and mid-stage high gods, and a bunch of mid-gods. They numbered in the hundreds. Their strength had far exceeded that of Ballins, Gilbert, Sanguis, and their 50 guards. You guys seem to have been indulging yourselves in killing indiscriminately. Hee, to attack Sovereign Log's followers, how brazen. The late-stage high god of death said in a mocking smile. He looked at Sanguis, Gilbert, and the others who had been surrounded and immediately gave the ultimatum. You have two choices. You can bow and pledge your allegiance to Lord Log, or you can fucking die. It was only now that Sanguis and Gilbert realized that the fringe was nothing like the darkness and death dominions, that the land of chaos was indeed filled with extremely formidable experts, and they were extremely brutal. Sanguis, the strongest of the three, was confident that he could defeat a mid-stage high god expert. Against a late-stage high god, however, he stood no chance at all. Their enemy had 2 late-stage high god and 6 to 7 high gods in early and mid-stages. It was clear that they had no chance of winning. Sanguis and Gilbert suddenly looked at each other with a hint of despair in their eyes. They finally regretted not heeding the advice and being too arrogant. Friend, we are members of the Pandemonium's House of Han. Ballins suddenly stepped forward and said in a moderate attitude. Unlike Sanguis and Gilbert, he remained as calm as usual. The mind that he had tempered through overcoming perils and hardships had proved useful during critical moments. What? Pandemonium. House of Han? The face of the bald late-stage high god that had a mocking smile suddenly jolted. He asked, Who are you to Lord Brian? This is his disciple, said Ballins as he pointed at Sanguis. Ballins heaved a sigh of relief after seeing the person's reaction. He thought, I senior brother indeed has a terrifying reputation in the fringe. I guess with his name, we would be out of danger. I, the bald high god, put on a grave face and sized up Ballins, Sanguis, and Gilbert for a while as though weighing his options. Then suddenly he shouted, Kill all of them, leave none alive. Otherwise, if Brian finds out, we will cause the Lord a lot of unnecessary troubles. If any of you fails and they manage to escape, I will skin you." "You dare?" shouted Bollins in a ferocious voice. He was alarmed. "Ha, why do we not? You think that we are afraid of you just because you are associated with Brian? Ha, with all of you dead, he will have no idea who killed you. How would he find out that it's me? Let me tell you outsiders something. We fringe dwellers are all fucking nuts. There's nothing that we are afraid of doing," said the bald high god as he laughed wildly. He did seem very much like a lunatic. After having a good laugh, he gestured and commanded, "Attack!" Ballin's heart jolted. He knew that they were in deep shit. Chapter 919, Pleasing to the Eye GDK 919. Pleasing to the eye, the bald high god saw that Sanguis, Ballins, Gilbert, and their forces were much weaker than theirs, and therefore planned to exterminate them altogether. If none of them could live to tell the tale, no one would know who had killed them and avenge their deaths. As soon as the bald man coldly gave the command to attack, everyone in his gang charged forward. Ballins, Sanguis, Gilbert, and their divine guards became even more tightly surrounded. They had sealed every inch of space that they could escape from. "Slaughter away," commanded the bald high god in a sneer. He and the other late-stage high god of wind, however, did not get into action. Perhaps they thought that Ballins, Sanguis, Gilbert, and the others can easily be taken care of by his minions. 5 or 6 high gods and more than 100 mid-gods swarmed at them. Those high gods were at early to mid-stages. Sanguis and Gilbert gritted their teeth and charged forward, each intercepting a high god. Ballins quickly followed behind them and unleashed his incisive flying sword. The atmosphere was filled with killing intent, so intense that they had coagulated into matter. An early-stage high god who got too close to Ballins was startled by the terrifying killing intent. Sword radiances flashed. During the split moment he lost focus, he received deep wounds across his chests. "Sanguis, Gilbert, we will look for an opportunity to escape," shouted Ballins as soon as he forced his opponent to retreat. A chilling light flashed in Sanguis and Gilbert's eyes, and they started attacking their opponents more fiercely. They made powerful but risky attacks without any regard for their own lives. As their opponents were unwilling to sacrifice their own lives to kill Sanguis and Gilbert, they had no choice but to take defensive measures. However, Sanguis, Ballins, and Gilbert had to face not 3 but 6 high god. When all 6 of them had gathered and began attacking together, the trio immediately lost their upper hand. They would have perished in just minutes if not for their risky defensive maneuvers. While the 6 high gods had surrounded Sanguis, Ballins, and Gilbert, the more than 100 mid-god fringe dwellers encircled the House of Hand guards in chilling smirks. Then, suddenly, they simultaneously began their assault on the House of Hand guards. Although the House of Hand guards were outnumbered at least 2 times, their team combat strength was still much greater than that of the fringe dwellers. They abruptly spread out as though a giant machete. They had not only evaded most of the attacks, they had managed to cause tremendous casualties to their enemies. After the 2 forces exchanged their first blow, of the House of Hand guards, 5 were injured and 1 killed. Meanwhile, of the fringe dwellers, 30 were injured and 10 were killed. Although the combatants of both forces were all in the realm of Midgod, and the fringe dwellers outnumbered the House of Hand guards, the latter nonetheless managed to gain the upper hand with just 1 blow. The bald high god's face jolted when he observed the unusual phenomenon. Immediately, he instructed, "Divert 2 high god to kill those guards." The 6 high gods who were jointly beating up Sanguis, Gilbert, and Ballins immediately realized that their minions were losing when they heard the instruction. 1 early-stage high god and 1 mid-stage high god dropped their attacks on the House of Hand trio and charged at the guards. The 2 high gods had managed to immediately turn the tide of the battle. The House of Hand guards went from having the upper hand to losing. Casualties were gradually mounting. The trio of Sanguis, Ballins, and Gilbert immediately felt the pressure on them reduced. Originally, if Sanguis or Ballins still could not find an opening to escape in the next few minutes, they would all be doomed. But after 2 of the high gods were redirected away, despite being injured, the 2 of them now had a chance to escape. But it appeared that the bald high god who had only been watching wasn't going to let the battle drag on any longer. Seeing that his minions could not destroy these members of the House of Hand straightforwardly, he sneered and said, It seems that the rumors are true. Those of the House of Han is not to be belittled. Humph, but even so, you will not escape your fate of death. Upon finishing those words, he along with the late-stage High God of Wind gradually approached the House of Han trio who had been surrounded. He was going to make the battle end in the shortest time possible. "Leave now, Sanguis, or we will never be able to," shouted Ballins hastily when he saw that the two late-stage High Gods were going to intervene. But what about them? Sanguis took a quick glance at the House of Han guards. His red eyes were filled with reluctance. Uff! The split second of distraction had allowed a bone spear to pierce Sangui's chest. Blood immediately started flowing out from the wound. "We need to leave in order to avenge their deaths." Ballins got anxious when he saw that Sanguis was being indecisive. He knew that when the two late-stage High Gods joined the battle, they might not even have the chance to deploy their demonic escape technique. "Hee, wanna escape? You can't," said the bald High God in a mocking smile. As he spoke, he had raised his hand and launched an attack. When his deadly attack was about to land on Sanguis, Ballins, and Gilbert, a peal of loud, macho laughter suddenly sounded, and a majestic figure fell between the trio. He raised a hand, and the energy of destruction formed a grayish shield and intercepted the attacks of the bald High God. "Polo!" exclaimed the bald High God, and he immediately frowned. He coldly groaned and threatened, "You better not mess with my business, or don't blame me for messing you up. Nice attempt at intimidation, Luca, but I wouldn't have shown up if I'm afraid of you." Polo then gestured and shouted, "Brothers, step forward." After hearing Polo's cry, hundreds of figures wearing sinister faces revealed themselves from the shadows and surrounded the bald High God and his forces in an instant. The bald High God named Luca looked around him and saw that Polo had brought more than 300 experts and twice as many High Gods as he had. Luca's heart jolted. He stopped taking an offensive posture at the House of Han trio, but glared at Polo as he said, "Polo, you should know who I serve. You dare offend Lord Log? You should know the consequences of doing so. Don't you fucking try to intimidate me using Log. I ain't afraid of him." Polo laughed arrogantly before he said, "Oh, Luca, haven't you realized that the Fringe now is no longer the same? The sovereigns aren't the only ones who wield true powers. You are well informed in the Fringe. Do you not know who I now serve?" After hearing those words, the bald High God's face yet again jolted as though he had recalled a recent intel, that every god hunter in the Fringe had been united by a powerful existence. As Log's trusted aide, Luca was very much aware of how close that person was to Han Shuo. "You serve Han Hao?" Luca's face turned grave, and his attitude was no longer as arrogant. "Haha, so you do know about it. Now you better shoo the fuck off and leave these people from the House of Han alone. I will consult my chief later on what to do about your transgression, but you may go free for today," said Polo disdainfully in a smug smirk. "They may claim to be from the House of Han, but how would you know if it's true?" Luca complained. "There has been a shit ton of people traveling to the Omphalos claiming themselves to be members from the House of Han. Hell, even a goddamn monkey would claim itself to be related to the House of Han when in trouble. If we are to let everyone off, how would we keep our businesses going?" "I don't care, that's not my problem. Let them go or I will make you be gone," threatened Polo arrogantly, not bothering to argue with Luca. Luca wore an angered face as he considered his options. He understood that he was in no position to fight, but if he were to let Gilbert and the others free, when they returned to Han Shuo, he and his sovereign might get into trouble. Therefore, he hesitated and did not know which choice to take. Gilbert suddenly went to Polo with a smirk on his face and said, "Hey, you said you serve Han Hao?" Polo took a glance at Gilbert out from the corners of his eyes before he replied in an annoyed voice, "Yes." "What business is it of yours?" Gilbert was stunned. He did not expect Polo to be so arrogant towards him. Immediately, he frowned and shouted at Polo, "Fucking hell, I have known Han Hao since way back in Profound Continent. You are just his servant, but you dare speak to me like that? Where are your manners?" Polo jolted upon hearing those words. He then took a careful look at Gilbert, Ballins, and Sanguis, and found that the auras emanated by the trio were vaguely similar to that of Han Hao. With that, Polo asked, "You really are members of the House of Han? What the fuck? So you are deliberately messing with us, Polo?" Luca the bald High God immediately realized that Polo had shown up just to look for trouble. Polo put on a mischievous smirk and replied, "Hee, just as you've said, there are just too many outsiders traveling to the Omphalos claiming that they are from the House of Han. I couldn't tell if they are lying either. As Polo spoke, he took out a magical mirror. He then turned to Gilbert and asked, "What's your name? I need to report to my chief." "Tell him it's Gilbert the Dark Dragon. Although it's been a while, I'm sure that he still remembers me," replied Gilbert, beaming ear to ear. Polo nodded and went to a corner. His minions had surrounded him before he activated the magical mirror and communicated with his master. Gradually, Han Hao's figure appeared in the magical mirror. After listening to Polo's narration, he gave Polo a straightforward command. Polo nodded, and the call was disconnected. The smile on his face vanished, and he returned to Gilbert with a dark, murderous demeanor. "What? Don't tell me that he had forgotten about me." Gilbert panicked when he saw the murderous look on Polo's face. "Kill them all. Leave none alive," commanded Polo in a chilling voice. "Kill who?" asked Polo's rather confused followers. "Idiots, Luca of course. Isn't it fucking obvious? Why would I kill someone as pleasing to the eye as Gilbert?" Chapter 920, Despicable. Chapter 920. Despicable. After hearing Polo's words, the God Hunters marched forward with sneers on their faces. They slowly tightened the circle and surrounded Luca and his troops even more tightly. Luca's heart jolted. He shouted, "You dare. I'm the most trusted servant of Lord Log. If you touch me, his lordship won't let you off." Luca knew that he stood no chance against Polo and his forces, and once again tried to intimidate Polo using Log's name. "With all of you dead, he will have no idea who killed you. How would he find out that it's me?" Polo put on a malevolent smirk and said, "Besides, so what if Log finds out? Do you think Lord Han Hao would be afraid of him? Haha, my brothers, slaughter away. Leave none alive." Luca had said those words to mock Ballins, Gilbert, and Sanguis after surrounding them. He did not expect that in just minutes later, he would have a taste of his own medicine and be mocked by Polo by the same exact words. Luca could not be more annoyed, but against Polo, who was just as savage as he was, there wasn't much that he could do about it. Polo did not give Luca the chance for more prattling and charged at him ferociously. He engaged Luca with a late-stage High God of Thunder. Sanguis was astounded. He looked at Gilbert puzzlingly and asked, "How would this guy who you call Han Hao command such a powerful group of experts? From what you've said, it doesn't sound like he was all that strong when back in the profound continent. How could he recruit so many powerful followers in just a short few decades?" "Well, how would I know?" Gilbert giggled and said, "But that guy has been a peculiar one all along. He would murder and plunder with Master, and have served Master much longer than we have. Hee, back then in the Abyss realm, weren't you just as weak and powerless? But look at the heights you are at now. Should it really come as a surprise to you that he, Master's first follower, could soar in strength so rapidly?" "That's right. Back then, while we were in the City of Shadows building our House of Han, he was in Ronson Canyon building his God Hunter faction. He was the de facto ruler of the Ronson Canyon before he left for the Fringe. It was only natural that his strength and influence have grown even greater after having stayed in the Fringe for so long," explained Ballins, who had heard a thing or two about Han Hao. "I really wish to meet him," muttered Sanguis. In the House of Han, Sanguis had always been the most powerful expert after Han Shuo. Sanguis' strength had been rapidly progressing in the past few years, and his arrogance had risen in tandem. It was only natural that Sanguis, a hot-headed teenager, would like to challenge Han Hao, who seemed to possess strength and prestige that surpassed his. Ballins and Gilbert looked at Sanguis in a funny look, but they did not comment about it. They both knew that although Sanguis had been rapidly progressing in strength, he would still stand no chance against Han Hao. To fight Han Hao was to smack a rock at his own feet. If Polo, a follower of Han Hao's, possessed late-stage High God strength, then logically, Han Hao must possess even greater strength than Polo. Given that Sanguis could not even defeat a late-stage High God at this point, it would be impossible for him to defeat Han Hao. While Ballins, Gilbert, and Sanguis were chatting, those minions of Luca were being crushed by Polo's God Hunters. They suffered heavy casualties in just moments. "Gilbert, Sanguis, look at the movement and coordination of these God Hunters. Does it look familiar to you?" asked Ballins suddenly. Sanguis and Gilbert started to carefully observe the God Hunters for a moment, and their faces jolted slightly. Surprisingly, Polo's God Hunters knew how to effectively fight as a team. It was obvious from their footsteps and coordination that they had been taught demonic combat formations. Although they had not been tempered for years inside the 8 Desolation and Torment formation, and were not as well trained as the House of Han guards, their effective combat strength was nonetheless significantly amplified under the demonic combat formation, allowing them to crush Luca's poorly coordinated forces easily. That guy has indeed learned plenty from Master. Haha, no wonder he would be so accomplished among the God Hunters, remarked Gilbert smilingly after making observations. He is indeed extraordinary. Sanguis has met his match, it seems, remarked Bollins after taking a glance at Sanguis. Bollins understood that Sanguis' temperament would change for the worse as his strength soared, and he was starting to look down upon others. Bollins thought that it might be good for Sanguis to eat a humble pie. Besides, Han Hao was also a member of the House of Han. Friendly competition would be great for tempering Sanguis. Let's help them up. Haha, after all, it's not courteous to just stand and watch, suggested Gilbert excitedly after doing nothing for a while. Before Bollins could speak, red lights burst from Sangui's eyes, and he charged at the enemies as an intense reeking of blood emanated from his body. Having Han Hao as a strong competitor seemed to have motivated Sanguis. Somehow, he seemed to have obtained yet another breakthrough in his cultivation of Blood God mantra. Holy fuck, that blood aura of his have intensified. Don't tell me that he has obtained yet another breakthrough. Sanguis is absolutely wild. Gilbert was familiar with Sanguis' strength, and they were standing close by. He exclaimed when he sensed that the blood aura on Sanguis had grown more intense than before. Bollins nodded gladly and put on a prideful faint smile. He remarked, Sanguis is indeed talented. At this speed of progress, one day, he might even exceed Han Hao in strength. I doubt that. Haha, you have not met Han Hao before. That guy is even more terrifying and even more callous and heartless than you are. There is no way that Sanguis could progress as fast as he could in terms of realm state, remarked Gilbert after thinking for a moment. He felt that Sanguis lacked something that little skeleton had. I can't wait to meet him, said Bollins. He too seemed very interested in Han Hao. Come, let's kill these bastards, cried Gilbert before charging at Luca's minions. Polo's forces had the upper hand over Luca's forces. With Sanguis, Bollins, and Gilbert joining the massacre, Luca's minions perished at an even faster rate. One after another, they would let out miserable shrieks and perish after all their divine energy was drained. In just moments, the more than 100 midgods that Luca brought were annihilated. All that left was Luca and a few high gods who were struggling to survive. However, it was clear that they won't be able to last for much longer. There's no escape, Luca. What a fucking shame that you don't cultivate destruction energy. Otherwise, I could have a real feast today, said Polo haughtily as he beat up Luca with 5 of his god hunters. Don't worry about it, Polo. Though you may not be able to absorb his energy, we can, remarked a high god of death as his eyes, shining with ravenous, savage light, stared fixedly on Luca. Saliva overflowed from the corner of his mouth as he grinned. Luca grew even more desperate and despaired as he listened to the god hunters discussing how to divide the divine energy in his body among themselves. Whenever he tried to use a certain item in his space ring to escape, the firepower shot at him would increase by several folds, forcing him to defend and unable to utilize the escape tool. As the battle went on, the injuries on Luca's body grew more and more severe. Suddenly, he noticed that his eyelids felt incredibly heavy and the cognitive ability of his divine soul was diminishing. Poison? You. You have complete upper hand, and yet you use. Poison? Luca felt lethargic. He could barely lift his arms and legs as they seemed as heavy as lead. Luca stared at the sneering Polo with discontent as he strenuously yelled, Despicable, how despicable. You will die horribly. Hee, we know that given your strength, we will have to suffer some losses if we were to kill you by normal means. But luckily for us, the House of Han makes medicines. Our weapons have been laced with a colorless and odorless poison called Godfall. It is said that Lord Brian himself had produced them. Accept your fate, replied Polo in a most treacherous smile. Polo and his god hunters had been attacking Luca, but not dealt him the killing blow as to let him have hope and not make a kamikaze attack. However, they would moderately make cuts on Luca's body with their poisoned weapons and slowly poison him. Godfall, a poison made by Han Shuo, was not just odorless and tasteless, but it also doesn't activate in low doses so that the victim had no idea that they were being poisoned. The poison would very slowly make its way around the victim's divine body and penetrate every cell. When the dosage was enough, when the victim felt the effects of the poison, it would be too late. The poison would affect both the divine body and the divine soul. No matter what they do, they won't be able to assemble their energy. They would be incapacitated and become a sitting duck. It would be impossible to do anything, much less making a kamikaze attack. Wahaha, Master is indeed becoming more and more despicable. This Godfall poison is wonderful stuff. Ha, I must ask Master for some later. It is very damn useful for committing massacre. This is like slowly pushing the enemies off the cliff without them knowing until it's too late. Haha. Gilbert called Han Shuo despicable, but it seemed that he used the word not as an insult but praise. He seemed very admiring and proud of Han Shuo. Chapter 921, Osteoberg GDK 921. Osteoberg under the effects of the Godfall poison, Luca was incapacitated and unable to utilize the energy in his body. Several high gods of death swarmed at him and jointly sucked his divine energy dry. He could only watch helplessly as the god hunters kill him slowly. After Luca was killed, the remaining few of his minions soon suffered the same fate. Just as Polo commanded, not a single one of them was spared. The Godfall poison had played a significant role in Polo's swift and effortless victory in this battle. Luca and his forces did not realize that they were being poisoned before it was too late. Without any capacity to resist, they became living divine essences for the god hunters. After the massacre was over, it was time to clean up the crime scene. Polo's god hunters would take out bottles of azure blue powders and apply them to the wounds of the bodies. In just moments, those bodies would completely liquefy, leaving no evidence behind other than a puddle of bloody liquid. Polo put on a gratified smile and explained to the House of Han trio, "Hee, thanks to these extraordinary medicines provided by Celestial Pearl, we have a much easier time doing our jobs." Ballins swept his gaze across those liquefied bodies and nodded his head indifferently. He said, "We would like to meet Han Hao. Chief is not in this area and his lordship is in the middle of something. But if you will be staying in the Omphalos, you will have the opportunity to meet him in the near future," replied Polo in a friendly manner as though he had transformed into another person. "All right then, thank you for your help," replied Ballins. "Haha, you're too polite. We're all friends here, so don't need to be so cordial." Polo was aware of Han Hao's relation with the House of Han, and he had considered himself a fringe member of the house. There was no way that Polo would be smug before Ballins. "Be it as it may, we appreciate your assistance. All right, we will continue heading towards Omphalos, but we will be more careful. We probably won't run into any more troubles," said Ballins after thinking for a moment. He then turned to Gilbert and Sanguise and said, "Let's get moving." Sanguise and Gilbert nodded. With the 30-something House of Han guards that remained, they separated with Polo. After making some distance from Polo, Ballins turned to his companions and remarked, "Polo and the others are god hunters. We House of Han must not be seen going too close with them, or it will affect our business in every dominion." Yes, Shifu must have thought of this issue, and therefore declined to clarify his relationship with Han Hao to the public all along, said Sanguise nodding. While Sanguise, Ballins, and Gilbert continued their journey to the Omphalos, Han Shu was still traveling with the main company. He had a gut feeling that something was wrong when the trio had not returned for days and was starting to worry about them. Han Shu could detect the general location of the trio when they were within a certain distance, but Sanguise, Gilbert, and Ballins were now far from the coverage of Han Shu's senses. Ballins, Sanguise, and Gilbert may possess decent strengths, but they were in the fringe, where the strongest and most abominable criminals from the 12 Dominion gathered. The strengths they possessed would only reduce the risk of them getting killed, but not eliminate it. 2 more days passed, but the trio still had not returned to the company. Han Shuo started to get somewhat anxious. When he was considering looking for them, he suddenly received a signal. With one thought, a demon general streaked across vast terrains in the northwest direction and stopped before a god hunter camouflaged with the ground. The demon general then materialized, taking Han Shu's appearance, and asked, "What's the matter?" The god hunter, who was a trusted aide of Han Hao, did not reply, but took out a scroll and respectfully handed it to Han Shuo. After reading the message, Han Shuo understood what Sanguis, Balins, and Gilbert had encountered, and he destroyed the scroll. The demon general then returned to its invisible state and vanished. Han Shuo, who was traveling in the middle of his company, bunched his brows and mumbled to himself, I wonder if Luca had acted on his own or by Log's command. The fringe, Audiobook. The ground was covered with white bones and wraiths could be seen wandering aimlessly. The intense element of death filled the atmosphere in the form of thin fog. Other than amplifying their strengths, experts of the death energy could progress faster while cultivating in this place. At the center of Osteoburg was a castle made purely out of bones. Log, one of the 5 sovereigns, lived in the eerie white castle. At this moment, Log was sitting on an enormous bone throne and wearing a cold, dark face as he listened to a report of one of his followers. Luca has vanished without a trace. We could not find even single evidence of him in his activity area, reported a burly expert of death energy on one knee. Luca is probably dead. Log coldly groaned, straightened his back in his seat, and continued, those few kiddos are definitely no match against Luca. It must be someone else who killed him. Brian is getting more and more out of line. It seems that I must take action sooner. My lord, from the first day that this person entered the fringe, he had done nothing but mess up the system and many of the established rules. The Pandemonians are becoming more and more domineering, and many of the newcomers are enlisting themselves with the Pandemonians. They get stronger with each day past. My lord, we must not allow this problem to fester. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to destroy them, advised the burly man gravely. Log let out yet another cold groan. He gestured and instructed, I'm very much aware of it. You are dismissed. After the burly man left, Log immediately changed his expression, putting on a cordial smile. He raised his head and said to the sky, I've been expecting you. A dark light suddenly cast downward. The strongest sovereign of the fringe, Tyre, stood before Log, and he immediately said in a grave expression, Don't be hasty about Brian. We have a bigger problem. I have received reliable intel that the hegemons are marching for the fringe. This is nothing like we have faced before. Currently, 7 of the hegemons have mobilized. What? Log's face jolted and he cried, The Godhunter hegemons have always been divided and uncooperative, or the fringe would have fallen to them long ago. How? What could have possibly united them? I heard that Brian has wiped out the Godhunter bases in the Darkness and Death Dominions. The 2 sovereigns consider him a threat to the existence of the Godhunter Alliance and want to destroy Brian at all costs. As his base happens to be at the fringe, they thought that they might as well conquer the fringe while they are at it, said Tyre in a grimace. It's him again. Log got furious. He suddenly slammed the armrest of his throne, stood up, and complained, Ever since this guy steps into the fringe, he just keeps on making us troubles and troubles. And now, he even made the hegemons unite. This guy is a scourge that needs to be eliminated. Don't worry about that just yet. We need to deal with the Godhunter Alliance first. Without concealing his murderous intention, Tyre said, I know you want him dead, so do I. But now is not the time to do so. Even if we attack Brian and succeed, the Godhunter Alliance will still carry on with the invasion. And by then, we will be too exhausted to defend ourselves. Malicious, sinister lights glinting from Log's little eyes. He nodded and smilingly said, I have an idea. We can push him forward and let him take the brunt of the Godhunter Alliance's attack. With that, he will be forced to go all out against the Godhunter Alliance. If he ended up getting killed, that'd be the best. If he won, we could then get rid of him without too much effort. In short, we must not let him live. That's a great idea, Tyre chucked sinisterly. But can Brian and his forces handle the Godhunter Alliance? Isn't there Wasir and Asura? Log put on a scheming smile and said, The 2 of us just need to plan ahead and push the 3 of them to the front line. As long as they fight the Godhunter Alliance before us, we will be in great positions. If all 3 of them end up dead, the fringe will be ours. Tyre kept silent for a moment before he suddenly laughed heartily and said, It seems that I have made the right decision in coming to meet you. Let's discuss and make a thorough plan. With the power and influence we have in the fringe, we can easily make those 3 fight the front line. And when this is done, Tyre, We will split the fringe into two, you'll have one side and I will take the other. Sounds good, let's discuss. Tyre and Log began scheming. One day later, Tyre left the Audiobook with a big smile on his face. He went to a secluded spot, deployed layers of barriers around him, and took out his magical mirror. The image in the magical mirror twisted and warped, gradually revealing a face that Han Shu knew. It was one of the hegemons of the Godhunter Alliance Daka. Elder brother, so here's the deal. Tyre had a relaxed look as he told Daka every detail about his negotiation with Log. Daka nodded as he listened to Tyre. After a while, he smilingly replied, "After this battle, I will be in charge of the Godhunter Alliance, and you will be the ruler of the Fringe. And by then, we brothers will join forces, open the path to Eternia, and steal the quintessences." Ha ha ha, sorry Log, but the Fringe won't be split into two. It will be united under my rule. Tyre laughed out loud. Chapter 922, Unnatural. Chapter 922. Unnatural. Han Shu and his family clan members did not rush in their journey. After half a month, they finally arrived at the Omphalos. Han Shu now possessed 10 sovereign shops in the Omphalos, and one of the city's entrances, roughly facing the Pandemonium, was controlled by Han Shu's minions. Needless to say, the House of Han members were allowed into the Omphalos without having to pay any entrance fees. Sanguis, Bollins, and Gilbert had reached the Omphalos long ago, and they had been waiting at the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. As soon as Han Shu and his company arrived, Bollins stepped forth to apologize. "Senior brother, the three of us had recklessly traveled far ahead of the company and ran into the underlings of Sovereign Log. Had Han Hao's followers not come to our rescue in time, I'm afraid we wouldn't have reached the Omphalos. I take full responsibility for this avoidable incident. Please punish me." Bollins tried to take full responsibility for the mistake. He did not reveal that it was Sanguis and Gilbert who had egged him into doing so. "No, master, it wasn't his fault. It was Sanguis and I who came up with the idea," shouted Gilbert. Sanguis did not speak but nodded, agreeing with Gilbert. "All right, that's enough. I know what happened and I don't have to hear your recount," said Han Shu in an annoyed manner. He glared at Bollins and said, "I know you well, Bollins. It's obvious that you couldn't have come up with such an idea. Gilbert, Sanguis, you are grounded for 2 years starting from this day. Your recklessness had led to the death of 20 of our House of Han guards, your comrades. Use the time to repent," chided Han Shu coldly. Sanguis and Gilbert lowered their heads in shame. They recognized their mistakes and accepted Han Shu's punishment. "Emily, Phoebe, Stratham, you will continue to manage the Celestial Pearl. We will head to the Pandemonium after I have sorted out a few things here," instructed Han Shu. After settling the House of Han in the Celestial Pearl, Han Shu looked for Zavik and softly instructed, "Contact Asura, Tyre, Log, and Wasir. Tell them that the Godhunter Alliance will be invading the Fringe and they better get prepared." Zavik's face turned grave after hearing those words. He nodded and respectfully dismissed himself to carry out the order. After that, Han Shu gathered every of his core family members in a secret chamber and announced in a faint smile, "All of you came with me from the profound continent to this world many years ago, and you all have been rapidly advancing in strength. However, I still feel that you could do even better." As Han Shu spoke, he started taking out crystal balls around the size of a fist. Each of the crystal balls contained a grayish, gas-like object that constantly changes its shape in an unpredictable manner. Using their divine souls, the party sensed weak soul energy emanating from the crystal balls. You have probably sensed the weak soul signatures emanating from these crystal balls. They contain divine souls of high gods who cultivated in various energies. However, I have erased their awareness and everything in their souls, save for their cultivation experiences and knowledge," explained Han Shu smilingly as he glanced through the party. The party stared blankly after listening to Han Shu, for they weren't sure what Han Shu wanted them to do with it. But unlike the others, Fanny, who cultivated the energy of death, seemed pleasantly surprised. She cried out excitedly, "Brian, you mean to have us assimilate these souls? I know that souls without self-awareness are equivalent to pure memories, and they can be absorbed by our divine souls. If these souls used to be high gods, that means their memories contain." Everyone in the chamber also put on the same pleasantly surprised faces before Fanny had finished her words. Their eyes lit up as they realized what treasure was laid before them. When they took their first step on Elysium, these people who came from the profound continent realized just how weak they were, and they had been doing all they could to increase their strength. Using the tremendous financial resources of the House of Han, they had been making rapid progress. However, money could only get them this far. Although they could gain divine energy by purchasing large amounts of divine essences, no amount of black crystal coins could buy them the knowledge and understanding they needed to advance to their next realm. This was similar to how an earthling would need decades to learn and master advanced mathematics or physics. The individual must make constant effort to understand the subject. Mastery could only be achieved through the individual's grit and talent. Therefore, despite having access to tremendous financial resources, most of the House of Han members stagnated in the mid-god realm. A few of the less talented ones were still in the low-god realm. They would need decades, if not centuries, to reach where they want to be. But those crystal balls Han Shuo presented will allow them to skip all that time and effort. Not just Han Shuo's harem, but even old fellas like Stratham and Iremike were in raptures. Iremike looked at Han Shuo in disbelief and emotionally asked, "Brian, how did you do that? We have lived on Elysium for a while now, but never had we heard that it is possible to artificially erase the self-awareness of a soul without damaging it. That is miraculous. I think even those quintessence overgods cannot do so." Ikermike's words had reminded the party just how difficult it was to erase the self-awareness of a high god soul, and to somehow prevent it from naturally degrading and vanishing into the world. During the many years they lived on Elysium, they learned that it was only in a extremely unique environment and under unique circumstances that a divine soul without self-awareness could form. But this was an extremely rare natural phenomenon. They had never heard it be achieved artificially. Naturally, Han Shuo wouldn't explain his ability granted by demonic arts to alter souls. He smiled and replied, "Don't bother asking how I did it. Just focus on fusing with these high god souls and assimilate their knowledge. After obtaining the understanding and comprehension they had accumulated over the centuries, you will all obtain breakthroughs very easily. With sufficient divine energy, you will reach high godhood in just a few years." The party was overjoyed. Next, they each received a crystal ball of their energy following Han Shuo's assignment. Most of the souls are in the mid-stage high god realm, and a few of them are in the late-stage high god realm. The information contained in their souls would be extremely enormous. Take caution when assimilating their souls. Do not try to take in everything in one shot, lest your soul crumbles. The special container you are holding stops their soul from degrading and dissipating. So take your time and absorb their knowledge bit by bit in intervals. Again, do not more than what you can handle, warned Han Shuo when he saw the ecstatic faces of the party. "Don't worry, Brian, we've got it," said Emily cheerfully. No one could be happier than her and Phoebe. During the past many years, they had placed most of their energy on Celestial Pearl and did not have as much time to cultivate as the others did. Therefore, in the House of Han, Phoebe and Emily had been making relatively slow progress, especially in their realm state. Despite having the privilege to enjoy more divine essences than the others, they stagnated in their cultivation as they were bottlenecked by their realm states, which needed time that they did not have. They had been feeling rather worried about falling too far behind the others, but now, with these crystal balls, that will no longer be an issue. This act is against the natural order. We need to keep this a top secret. No outsider must know anything about this. God hunters are Elysium's public enemy for consuming another person's divine energy. What we are doing is the same as consuming another person's soul. This would be more outrageous than what the God hunters are doing. We must never, ever reveal a thing about this. Otherwise, the House of Han will become Elysium's public enemy, warned Iremike gravely. That's right. This is why I had dismissed the House of Han guards earlier. Only we who came from the profound continent can know about this. Keep this knowledge within this circle. And if you want to exchange your findings, only do so in a secret chamber, warned Han Shuo gravely. After hearing the warnings, everyone in the room understood the importance of keeping it a secret, as what Han Shuo did was 100 times more appalling than what the God Hunters did. They withdrew their smiles and solemnly swore not to divulge a thing to outsiders. Good, I believe everyone understands how important this is. Han Xiu smiled and continued. All right, you all be careful. We will be moving to the Pandemonium after I've met Asura. Over there, you won't have to worry about anyone finding out. With layers of demonic formations around it, even the sovereign cannot glimpse into the Pandemonium. Other than Sanguis and Balins, every House of Han members received a crystal ball. Even Gilbert received the soul of a mid-stage high god of darkness. With those divine souls and the tremendous financial power of the House of Han, Han Shuo believed that it wouldn't be long before these people would soon possess powerful strengths, and he could spend less time worrying for their safety. After the meeting was over and when everyone had left, Han Shuo took out 2 crystal balls. It was time to advance his 2 avatars. Chapter 923, Feigning Civility, GDK 923. Feigning Civility of the 2 crystal balls. One contained the divine soul of Hill, the former city lord of Witherbone City, while the other contained the divine soul of a godhunter chief who cultivated destruction energy. Both of them were in late-stage high god realms. Their self-awareness was erased and contained nothing but their knowledge and understanding of the energy they cultivated. After entering the Space Dominion, Han Shuo had proceeded with erasing the divine brand that the god of death placed in Hill's divine soul. He knew that the Death Overgod must have sensed his action, but he wasn't worried about it as he was outside the Death Dominion. And it appeared that Han Shuo's speculation was right. So far, the Overgod of Death had yet to take any action despite knowing that Hill was murdered. It seemed as though he wasn't going to do anything about it. Han Shuo held 1 crystal ball in each hand. His 2 avatars gradually emerged from the cauldron of Myriad Demon, sat on the sides of his main body, and received the crystal balls. After having ascended to Skybreak Realm in demonic arts, Han Shuo's strength substantially increased, far surpassing that of his avatars that cultivated in the energies of death and destruction. It had been a while since he last used his avatars against an enemy, and he had been slacking on their cultivations. Han Shuo understood that no matter how rapidly his avatars would improve in strength, they most likely cannot catch up to the strength of his main body. But Han Shuo thought that those avatars were still worth keeping. He knew that the avatars could fuse their domains of divinities and unleash tremendous power. He thought that his avatars should take on a cultivation path that focuses on fusing their energies. Under the manipulation of the 2 avatars, the 2 crystal balls gently floated up and hovered before their faces. They began opening their divine souls and acquiring connections with the information and memories contained in those formatted souls. When their divine souls came into contact with the crystal balls, they instantly sensed that a tremendous amount of messages were contained within. Following their thoughts, the life forms in the crystal balls suddenly begin flashing and moving erratically. Segments of memories were fusing with their divine souls. Meanwhile, the consciousness of Han Shuo's main body had split into 2, each entering a crystal ball. His consciousness would sort and arrange the memories in those crystal balls as they flowed into the divine souls of his avatars. If it was Phoebe, Emily, or the others, they would have to spend tremendous efforts to assimilate the divine souls in those crystal balls. The memories and understanding of those souls were disordered, and they must spend a long time to defragment the memories. Otherwise, not only will their realm state not rapidly progress, but their realm state might even go retrograde. But with the assistance of his main body's consciousness, Han Shuo's avatars would only take a fraction of the time needed to assimilate those souls. He could absorb the libraries of knowledge and memories in those crystal balls once through rather than having to do it bit by bits like Strathome and the others had to. In just 3 days, Han Shuo's avatars had completed the assimilation. The vast sea of information and insight into the energies of death and destruction were now in the minds of his avatars, readily accessible. With that, Han Shuo's consciousness returned to his main body. "Come in," said Han Shuo, after his avatars returned into the cauldron in his body. Zavik, who had been waiting outside for a long time, hastily entered the chamber. He respectfully bowed before he said, "Asura has a message for your lordship. He is inviting you to Tyre's sovereign shop where he, Tyre, Log, and Wasir have been waiting." That was fast. Han Shuo nodded and got on his feet before he instructed Zavik. "Enhance the security of the Celestial Pearl for now, and make sure that no outsider could step into the restricted areas. HS knew that his family members would be assimilating those divine souls given to them in the secret chambers, and he wanted to take extra precautions to prevent anyone from discovering their acts. Understood, no unauthorized person could step into the Celestial Pearl, save for the retail sections, pledged Zavik confidently. Good. Without wasting any more words, Han Shuo left his gymnasium and headed for Tyre's sovereign shop unhurriedly. 10 minutes later, Han Shuo arrived at his destination. This sovereign shop of Tyre's does not conduct any business. It was a gathering place for Tyre's minions and the operations center for his stringers, used for collecting all sorts of information in the Fringe and the 12 Dominions. It was thanks to the intelligence agency in this building that among the sovereigns, Tyre would always be the first to learn about the most recent events in the Fringe with the greatest accuracy. Welcome, Lord Brian. The sovereigns are all inside. Let me lead the way. One of Tyre's followers stationed at the front door respectfully greeted Han Shuo without delay and invited him into the building. Han Shuo was led to a luxurious and expansive lounge. The floor was covered with a soft carpet and the walls were filled with decorative lightings. Tyre, Wasir, Log, and Asura, all wearing dark faces, sat far apart in the room, sitting in opposing directions. When Han Shuo appeared, they nodded at him as a greeting. "Hey, Brian, we have been waiting for a while," Asura gestured, indicating Han Shuo to sit anywhere he liked. "You are dismissed," instructed Tyre at his follower, who led Han Shuo to the lounge. The person bowed at the 5 and respectfully left. The 5 mightiest existences in the Fringe were now gathered in the chamber. "Brian, the situation seems really bad. After receiving your message, we have sent our men for scouting. Those god hunters in many of the Dominion are indeed gathering towards the Fringe. Unlike the past, the god hunters seem to have been united and are moving out together." After Han Shuo took his seat, Asura let out a soft sigh and began describing the current situation in a grave face. "If the God Hunter Alliance are united against us, the Fringe would stand no chance against them," stated Wasir with his brows furrowed worriedly. Indeed, the reason that the Fringe had not fallen to their hands was that the God Hunter Alliance had always fought internally and could not unite against us. But things are quite different this time. From the intel I have collected, it appears that every faction of the Alliance has temporarily ceased their internal strife and is determined to destroy the Fringe, said Log after he nodded. "I have met the hegemons of death, destruction, and darkness. Their strengths are very formidable. We definitely have a tough battle ahead of us as Salaz is working with them. With Salaz's familiarity with the Fringe, the God Hunter Alliance could navigate around easily, giving us defenders less of an advantage," said Han Shuo after he thought for a moment, deciding to reveal that he had exchanged blows with the 3 hegemons at the Misty Sea. "No wonder the God Hunter Alliance hegemons would be so united, all thanks to your good work." Log coldly groaned and said, "If you had not been massacring the God Hunters, the God Hunter Alliance wouldn't be so determined to invade us. You really know how to bring troubles to the Fringe, Brian." Upon hearing those words, Wasir and Asura turned to Han Shuo and looked at him with puzzled eyes. They did not expect that Han Shuo's actions in the Darkness and Death Dominions were the main driving factor of the God Hunter Alliance's unity and aggression towards the Fringe. Only Tyre had a calm face as though he didn't care who or what had triggered the matter. He smilingly mediated, "The God Hunter Alliance has coveted for our land for many years. Even if Brian did not attack them, it would still be a matter of time before they would attack us. Brian had not caused it, he only made it earlier. I did not expect that Salaz would work with those God Hunters. With Salaz's assistance, their invasion will become much smoother," remarked